Let's begin with something deceptively simple: appreciation. Most relationships do not collapse because of dramatic betrayals. They erode quietly through neglect. Not intentional cruelty, but assumption. We assume the other person knows how we feel. We assume they understand their value. We assume love, once declared, no longer needs to be demonstrated. But love is not sustained by assumption. It is sustained by recognition. When we stop expressing appreciation, we stop witnessing each other. And to be unseen in a relationship is one of the loneliest experiences a human being can have. Psychologically, appreciation functions as emotional oxygen. Human beings are wired for acknowledgement. From childhood, we learn who we are through the reflection we receive. A partner continues that mirroring process in adulthood. When your partner says, "I noticed what you did," or "I admire how you handled that," they are not merely being polite. They are affirming your identity. They are reinforcing your sense of worth. Without that reflection, doubt slowly replaces security. Over time, couples often shift from appreciation to evaluation. We stop noticing what is present and start noticing what is missing. The brain has a natural negativity bias. It scans for problems. In long-term relationships, this can become habitual. We see what they forgot instead of what they remembered. We focus on what they didn't do instead of what they consistently do every day. And here is the paradox. The more stable the relationship becomes, the less visible effort appears to be. When something is reliable, we stop recognizing it as effort. Yet reliability is effort sustained over time. Consider this: making coffee every morning, going to work every day, checking in with a message, handling responsibilities. These acts may seem ordinary, but relationships are built in the ordinary. Grand gestures create memories. Daily gestures create trust. Appreciation is not flattery. It is awareness. It requires presence. You cannot appreciate what you do not observe. So when you say thank you for something small, you are signaling, "I see you. I do not take you for granted." That sentence, spoken or unspoken, is profoundly stabilizing. Philosophically, appreciation is an antidote to entitlement. Entitlement whispers, "You owe me." Appreciation says, "You choose me." And there is a profound difference between the two. When we feel chosen, we remain engaged. When we feel obligated, we withdraw. Long-term intimacy requires a balance between familiarity and mystery. Appreciation keeps that mystery alive. It reminds us that the person beside us is not simply a role, husband, wife, partner, but an individual with agency. They could direct their energy elsewhere. They choose to direct it here. When appreciation disappears, relationships become transactional. We move into silent scorekeeping. "I did this, you didn't do that." Resentment grows not from major offenses but from accumulated invisibility. The daily discipline of gratitude interrupts that cycle. And let me be clear. Appreciation must be specific. General praise feels vague. Specific recognition feels intimate. Instead of saying, "You're great," say, "I appreciate how patient you were with me today." Specificity communicates attentiveness. It says you are not just praising, you are paying attention. There is also something deeply regulating about appreciation. When tension arises, the memory of being valued softens defensiveness. Couples who regularly affirm each other create emotional credit. So, when conflict comes, and it will, the relationship has resilience. This is not about forced positivity. It is about deliberate acknowledgement. Even in difficult seasons, there is something worthy of recognition: the courage to stay, the willingness to try, the effort to repair. Appreciation also transforms the person who expresses it. Gratitude shifts perception. When you intentionally look for what is good, your mind reorganizes around abundance rather than scarcity. The relationship begins to feel supportive rather than lacking. Many people wait for milestones to express love: anniversaries, birthdays, achievements. But emotional security is not built annually, it is built daily. Ask yourself, when was the last time your partner felt distinctly valued by you? Not for who they used to be, not for what they provide, but for who they are right now. Because people evolve, and appreciation must evolve with them. When you continue to notice your partner as they grow, you prevent stagnation. You remain curious. Curiosity is the foundation of desire, and appreciation fuels curiosity. If you want a relationship that feels alive, start by restoring visibility. Speak the small acknowledgements. Name the unnoticed efforts. Replace silent expectation with verbal gratitude. Love does not die from lack of passion, it dies from lack of attention. So today, choose awareness over assumption. Choose recognition over routine. Choose to make the invisible visible. Because when someone feels deeply seen, they do not drift away, they lean in. If appreciation is the oxygen of a relationship, then communication is its nervous system. It is how information travels. It is how meaning is negotiated. It is how two separate inner worlds attempt to understand each other. And yet, most couples do not communicate with intention. They communicate with reaction. Reaction is fast. It is impulsive. It is protective. It is the nervous system responding to perceived threat. A tone shifts. A sentence lands the wrong way. A memory is triggered, and suddenly the conversation is no longer about the present moment. It is about accumulated history. Intentional communication, on the other hand, requires pause. It asks us to move from reflex to reflection. Psychologically, every conflict in a relationship exists on two levels. There is the surface issue, the dishes, the lateness, the forgotten call, and beneath it, there is the emotional meaning. Do I matter? Am I respected? Can I rely on you? Most arguments are not about logistics. They are about significance. When couples react, they argue about the surface. When they communicate intentionally, they address the meaning. This is why listening is more transformative than speaking. To listen is not to wait for your turn. It is to temporarily suspend your own narrative and step into someone else's. That is a profound act of humility. It requires strength to say, "Help me understand what this meant to you." Many people believe good communication means expressing themselves clearly. That is only half of it. The other half is receiving without distortion. And distortion is common. We do not hear what was said, we hear what we fear. If you have ever felt misunderstood in a relationship, you understand the loneliness of speaking and not being received. It creates emotional distance far more quickly than disagreement does. Intentional communication slows the process down. It replaces accusation with curiosity. Instead of, "You never care," it becomes, "When this happened, I felt unimportant." One attacks character, the other reveals vulnerability. And vulnerability invites connection. But vulnerability feels risky, especially in long-term relationships where patterns have formed. If someone has previously responded defensively, you may armor yourself in advance. You become sharp to protect yourself from being dismissed. Here is the paradox. The more you protect yourself through aggression, the less safe the conversation becomes. Safety is co-created. It is not granted by one person alone. Emotionally mature couples understand that conflict is inevitable. Misunderstanding is inevitable. What matters is not the absence of friction, but the presence of repair. Can you return to each other after tension? Can you say, "That came out wrong," or "I see your point," or even simply, "I don't want us to fight like this"? Intentional communication also requires timing. Not every truth needs to be delivered immediately. Emotional flooding, when the body is overwhelmed, makes productive dialogue impossible. Heart rate increases, tone sharpens, cognition narrows. In that state, we are not connecting, we are surviving. Sometimes the most responsible action is to pause, not to withdraw permanently, but to regulate. To say, "I want to talk about this, but I need a moment to think clearly." That is not avoidance, that is stewardship of the relationship. Philosophically, communication is an act of interpretation. We are constantly assigning meaning to each other's behavior. The question is, are we interpreting generously or harshly? If your default interpretation is negative, "They don't care," "They're selfish," "They're dismissive," then every conversation will confirm that belief. But if your starting point is curiosity, what might they be experiencing? You create space for complexity. No one wants to be reduced to their worst moment. And yet, in arguments, we often define our partner by a single action. Intentional communication resists that simplification. It acknowledges that a person can disappoint you and still love you. There is also power in tone. Words matter, but delivery carries emotional weight. You can say the same sentence in a way that builds a bridge or burns one. Respect in tone communicates, Even in disagreement, I value you. And value is what keeps people engaged. Consider this. In a long-term partnership, you will have the same argument many times, just in different forms. The topic changes, but the underlying theme remains. The goal is not to eliminate recurring differences. It is to learn how to navigate them with less damage. Communication with intention means speaking to strengthen the bond, not to win the debate. Victory in conflict is meaningless if connection is lost. Ask yourself in the middle of an argument, do I want to be right or do I want to be close? That question alone can change the trajectory of a conversation. When you communicate intentionally, you create emotional predictability. Your partner knows they can approach you without being attacked. They know their feelings will not be mocked or minimized. That predictability builds trust, and trust is the architecture of intimacy. Ultimately, communication is not about perfection. It is about responsibility. Responsibility for your tone, responsibility for your timing, responsibility for the impact of your words. Because every sentence either builds the relationship or erodes it. So before you speak, pause. Ask yourself what you are truly trying to protect, your ego or your connection. Speak to be understood. Listen to understand. And remember, the way you talk to the person you love becomes the emotional climate they live in every day. And finally, we come to something that many couples underestimate because it feels abstract until it is violated: the daily protection of the bond. Love is not only something you feel, it is something you guard. When two people commit to each other, they are not just committing to affection, they are committing to stewardship. A relationship exists within a wider world: friends, colleagues, family, digital spaces, temptations, pressures. And in that world, boundaries are not restrictions, they are structures that preserve intimacy. Protection begins with loyalty in absence. How do you speak about your partner when they are not in the room? Do you protect their dignity, or do you expose their weaknesses for humor, sympathy, or validation? Public disrespect erodes private trust. A relationship cannot feel safe if it is not honored externally. There is something deeply destabilizing about discovering that your partner vents about you carelessly, shares intimate details casually, or allows others to speak about you with contempt. Even subtle disloyalty creates cracks. It signals, "You are not safe with me." Protection also means managing external influences consciously. Every relationship has boundaries around emotional access. Not every person deserves the same level of intimacy. When emotional energy that belongs inside the partnership begins flowing outward, confiding deeply in someone else, seeking validation elsewhere, building secret alignments, the bond weakens, often before anyone acknowledges it. Infidelity rarely begins with a physical act. It begins with a gradual shifting of priority. The question is not simply, "Would you cheat?" The deeper question is, where is your emotional investment directed on a daily basis? Protection is not about paranoia. It is about awareness. It asks, are we cultivating closeness here, or are we allowing distraction to dilute it? There is also protection during conflict. Disagreements are inevitable, but the way you fight either strengthens or damages the bond. When arguments become character attacks, contemptuous or public, the relationship absorbs that violence. Conflict should remain contained, not hidden in shame, but handled with discretion and respect. When you protect your partner's dignity, even in anger, you send a powerful message. We may be upset, but we are still aligned. This alignment is what distinguishes couples who endure from those who fragment. They understand that they are on the same side, even when perspectives differ. Philosophically, protecting the bond means prioritizing we without erasing me. It is a delicate balance. Autonomy matters, individual growth matters, but if autonomy becomes indifference, "I will do what I want, regardless of impact," then connection becomes fragile. Healthy boundaries acknowledge impact. You consider how your actions affect the emotional climate of your relationship, not out of fear, but out of care. Protection also requires intentional privacy. In the digital age, oversharing is normalized. Yet intimacy thrives in sacred spaces. Not every disagreement needs an audience. Not every frustration needs public commentary. When you keep certain experiences between the two of you, you reinforce exclusivity. And exclusivity, when chosen consciously, creates depth. There is strength in saying, "This is ours." Another dimension of protection is repair. When harm occurs, and it will, you do not minimize it, you do not deflect, you do not justify, you take responsibility. Repair is an act of protection because it prevents small fractures from widening. Some couples believe that commitment alone will safeguard the relationship. But commitment without maintenance becomes complacency. Protection is active. It is expressed in small decisions, declining inappropriate closeness, defending your partner in social settings, choosing transparency over secrecy, addressing tension early rather than letting resentment calcify. Protection also means protecting the relationship from your own worst impulses. Pride, stubbornness, the desire to win. In moments of ego, you may feel justified. But justification does not heal distance. Ask yourself in moments of tension, is what I am about to say or do strengthening us or weakening us? Long-term relationships require what I would call conscious loyalty. Not blind loyalty that tolerates harm, but chosen loyalty that nurtures trust. It is the daily reinforcement that we matter. And here is something profound. When people feel protected, they become more open. Security fosters vulnerability. When you know your partner safeguards your dignity, you are more willing to reveal your fears, your insecurities, your desires. Protection, then, is not restrictive. It is liberating. It allows the relationship to deepen because both individuals feel emotionally shielded. In a world full of noise, temptation, and external validation, the strongest relationships are not those without challenges. They are those where both partners actively defend the connection, not aggressively, not possessively, but intentionally, because love is not self-sustaining. It survives where it is valued. It thrives where it is guarded. And every day, in quiet choices no one else sees, you decide whether your relationship is something you simply have or something you consciously protect. Why? Because the nervous system relaxes in the presence of predictability. When someone consistently shows up in small ways, your body learns that you are safe. You do not need to brace. You do not need to question. You can exhale. Small acts of care are not about performance. They are about attentiveness. They say, "You are on my mind even when you are not in front of me." That message counters one of the greatest fears in relationships: invisibility. Over time, familiarity can dull perception. We stop seeing the person and start seeing the role. The partner becomes the co-parent, the provider, the roommate, the routine. Small acts of care interrupt that dullness. They reintroduce intentionality into ordinary moments. Think about the difference between living alongside someone and actively engaging with them. Coexistence is passive. Care is active. It requires energy. And energy directed toward the relationship signals investment. Philosophically, small acts of care reflect a deeper truth. Love is not just a feeling, it is a practice. Feelings fluctuate, practice stabilizes. If you rely solely on emotional intensity to guide your behavior, your relationship will mirror your mood. But if you treat care as a discipline, the relationship gains resilience. Consider something as simple as remembering an important meeting and sending a message afterward. How did it go? That question may take seconds to type, but it communicates alignment. It says, "Your world matters to me." And when two people consistently express interest in each other's inner worlds, the relationship remains alive. There is also humility in small acts of care. They do not seek applause. They are not transactional. You are not keeping score. You are not saying, "I did this, so you owe me." You are simply contributing to the emotional ecosystem of the partnership. And ecosystems thrive through maintenance. Neglect does not announce itself loudly. It creeps in. You stop asking follow-up questions. You stop touching casually. You stop noticing subtle changes. Nothing dramatic happens, but the warmth decreases degree by degree. Reintroducing small acts of care is how you restore temperature. It can be as subtle as physical proximity, sitting closer, offering a brief touch on the shoulder, making eye contact when they speak. These gestures regulate connection. They signal presence. In a world filled with distraction, presence has become a rare gift. We must also acknowledge that small acts require intentional awareness. When life becomes busy, work pressures, family responsibilities, personal stress, it is easy to operate on autopilot. But autopilot may sustain logistics. It does not sustain intimacy. Intimacy demands micro-decisions. The decision to ask one more question instead of scrolling. The decision to offer help instead of assuming they will manage. The decision to express affection instead of waiting for a better moment. These decisions accumulate, and accumulation defines culture. Every relationship has a culture, a pattern of interaction that becomes its identity. If your daily actions are warm, attentive, and responsive, your relationship culture becomes supportive. If they are distracted, dismissive, or indifferent, that culture forms instead. It is not the grand apology that sustains trust. It is the daily consistency that prevents repeated harm. It is not the annual celebration that sustains love. It is the ongoing demonstration of care. And here is something important. Small acts of care do not eliminate conflict. They create the emotional buffer to survive it. When someone feels consistently valued, they interpret mistakes less catastrophically. They give more grace. They remain open. This is how longevity is built, not through perfection, but through steady investment. Ask yourself, what are the small rituals that define your relationship? The way you greet each other, the way you say goodbye, the way you reconnect at the end of the day. These rituals either nourish or starve connection. If you want to strengthen your relationship, do not wait for inspiration. Choose discipline, choose the daily message, the brief touch, the remembered detail, the unsolicited kindness, because love rarely collapses from a lack of fireworks. It fades from a lack of fuel, and fuel is delivered in small, steady drops every single day.